And we are live with today's N10-008 Network Plus Study Group pre-show. We're going to get things set up here, and in the next 10 minutes, we'll get things started. So this is the part where I make sure that everything is working as it should be. This doesn't always go well, but right now it's looking okay. We got good streaming stats. Videos look good. We are recording down here. I've already done the update for the podcast. I think we're in pretty good shape here. It's a very hectic week here in the United States. For those of you that don't live here, we have Thanksgiving this week. It's a pretty big holiday. And so it's all the kids are out of school. Everyone's out shopping and trying to get food. And it's always busy this time of year. So thank you for stopping in and spending some time with us today. A little bit different than the normal Thanksgiving and holiday rush. We've got plenty to go through today. I've got all new questions for the N10-008 exam. And we can talk more about anything you want to discuss in the second hour, where I will open up the chat for any questions that you might have for me. So this is one of those benefits of this, is that I ask you questions for the first hour and you get to ask me questions for the second hour. So a little bit different. We turn the tables. We shift the gears. We do whatever it is that we would do there. Let me see if I can get a good mic. Sorry for the mic noise there. We'll figure out exactly where that should go. Kind of move it. I'm trying some new mic configuration. So we're going to see how this is working out. Did I make a mistake or did I do okay? This is what my constant changes are about in the studio. Let's try this. Did that work? No. Let's try another thing. Did that work? I think right now it's working pretty well. The question from Let's Play says, are there mosquitoes in North Florida? I think there's mosquitoes pretty much everywhere in the United States, isn't there? North Florida, they're big. They're carrying like a knife. They're big. They're big mosquitoes. They're aggressive. I guess pretty much like anywhere else, I guess. Not much difference than same thing in Georgia, same thing in Virginia, same thing probably in Maine. All up and down. Is there any part of the United States where there aren't mosquitoes? That's what I want to know. So there you go. Someone will Google this. Let's get some air going in here. Normally I have the door open, but I can't do that during a live stream. Otherwise there'd be noise and other things. So I'm going to make it a bit cooler in here. Once you close the door and you turn the lights on, you can't see the lights, but there are lights up here in front of me. You can kind of see it's reflecting off my hand. And there's lights behind me. And although they are LED, they still put out a bit of heat. So we will adjust the cooling accordingly so that I don't melt during the live stream. A minor thing to get that going. Hello, chat room. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for being here. Grab a seat. Make yourself comfortable. We're going to do all new Q&A. Everything gets started in about 6 minutes, just under. We'll figure out the details of what's going on. We got folks checking in from Africa and Virginia. We've got other folks in the chat room that have stopped in. Thanks for being here. Let's see what else I've got going on here. I don't really plan on making too many changes to the studio right now. We've got a lot of editing that's going on right now and posting. So there's quite a bit of activity on the Security Plus side. So if you've watched our channel most recently, I think we've put, 30 or 40 videos in the last couple of weeks. So there's a lot that's being posted. If you've not subscribed to our channel, you probably have no idea, and work through that. What do I say to people who tell me not to take A+ and skip to Network Plus and Security Plus? I say, have a look at what jobs are available. What jobs are they asking for? What certifications are those jobs asking for? And that's pretty much. So it really doesn't matter what people say. It's really more important what the hiring manager and the hiring companies say. I don't really care what anybody else says. They can say whatever they'd like. Ultimately, I want to do what's going to get me the best chance of getting that job. And if everybody wants an A+, that's the one I'm going to take. If everybody wants a Security Plus, that's the one I'm going to take. So it really depends on a lot of different factors, because those requirements from the hiring company change depending on where you are in the world and even in the United States. So if you are in the DC area, it will be a very different answer than if you are in Minneapolis, just to give you a for instance. I would expect it would be very different. And we can talk more about that in the after show if you'd like. You're more than welcome to leave a message. In fact, the message Q&A is already open on Vevox. If you are in Vevox, you can get there from professormesser.com/QA and figure out the details. All right. And Igor, you got your course notes and practice exams in the mail, the physical versions. Thanks for ordering those. I'm glad they showed up okay. One never knows this time of year if everyone will show up okay. So that's good. We've got, what else? Let's see if we can get more of this in here. We've got lots more to go through. This is our pre-show part. I've had people send me an email and they've said, well, I tried to tune into your study group, but it was just the back of your head. Look, and you weren't really saying anything. Well, that's true. The first 10 minutes are exactly that. They were pretty accurate with the description, I would say. It's after the 10 minutes when everything starts. So if you're watching and wondering what's going on, you could skip ahead to the very beginning. There will be timestamps in the YouTube video description, so you can see exactly where these things start and stop, which is kind of nice. But it takes about a day to get those in there because we have humans do it because we want it to be accurate. I love that I love that people are so encouraged by the idea of this AI. And certainly it does fix and help with a number of different things. But finding where in a YouTube video things start and stop is not one of them. You still need a human being. That's the real key. And I'm pretty proud that none of my content, none of my Q&A, none of my courses, nothing we do here, we hand off to some AI thing to try to get it done because it's inevitably a pointless exercise. It just gets it wrong every single time. It's just not smart. It's very, very dumb. It's not a smart system. So I like the smart people stepping in and actually doing things that require smart, nuanced, approachable type work. That's the important part, I think. Let's see if we've got what else is going on. Yeah, yesterday I uploaded 10 new videos. Today I'm uploading probably another 7 or 8, probably 8. I think the whole section 2 will be done by today. And then there's more coming, of course, right after that. We are halfway through the video editing part. So that part's great. So right now it goes very, very quickly. In fact, I have more videos sort of queued up than I have time to post, if you can believe that, if you can understand that. Do I watch a video before uploading it? Well, I edit the whole video. So yeah, I not only prepare the content that I'm going to say, I sit in front of the camera and say it, then I edit and watch and listen to everything that I am saying because sometimes I get it wrong and I need to fix it. And sometimes I need to make sure I know that I'm putting the right cuts in and the right editing is done. So that's another time all the way through. And then finally it gets posted. At that point, once I edit, I don't have to watch it anymore. I can send it on its way, release it to the world, and hopefully things go fine. One never knows, though. Sometimes they make a comment. Sometimes I get feedback and saying, hey, you just posted this, but here's an issue with the video. Sometimes there are mistakes where I have misedited or put a transition in the wrong place, or there's information that's just wrong on the slide, which happens all the time. But it's the internet. I can take it back, modify it, update it, re-edit, and then post it, and then it's a much more accurate version of this. And I'm very proud that we're able to do that because not everyone is for some reason. I don't know why. Let's see if we can get Keynote working. Let's get a green light. I like the green light. Let's see if we can check everything else. I think we're in pretty good shape. I think it's time for a live stream, everybody. Top of the hour. Let's see. Let's confirm top of the hour. Would be nice to make sure I've got the right time on my side. And let's do a live stream. What do you think? I think it's a great idea too. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2023 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I get you questions. I present questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and hopefully you're someone who can answer these questions in real time. During this first hour, we will give you those questions and we can talk about them. The second hour will be Q&A where you can ask me questions. And if you are here live with our Vevox app, you are able to join that Vevox app and put your questions in there. There's already a spot there where you can click on a tab and put your questions in right now that I will look at during the second hour. If you are joining us in this Vevox app right now, for this particular session, you go to vevox.app, and the ID number is 183-049-493. That number again, 183-049-493. Operators are not actually standing by, so I apologize for that. We'll have to work on that. There's, of course, an app for this as well. You can download the Vevox app from any of your favorite app stores and put it onto your mobile device. There's lots there. And if you are able to do that, either visit the link at the bottom of the screen, professormesser.com/QA, or you go to the Vevox app and use that code that we just provided. There will be a question waiting for you. That question asks, a technician is using a multimeter during wind troubleshooting. So already you can see why I'm talking about mistakes in my videos. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this use? Would it be, let's see how we do here. Would it be verify the operation of a router interface, fasten a network wire to a wiring block, mirror traffic on a switch interface, create a wire map, or listen for an analog sound on the wire? So these are a lot of different options. The rule that we have in our study groups, though, is that you answer online using the information that's on your screen. Please do not answer in the chat room. Please do not put any hints into the chat room. We're going to see how well. If you notice, this is a question from last month. This is what we call our rewind question, just to make sure you can get into Vevox. You're able to answer the questions, that everything is working properly for you. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Well, this is our monthly study group. We do one of these study groups for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus every month. Whenever we start working through these study groups, one of the things that I always remind you is that this is not only the only thing that we do, of course. You can find weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions on Instagram and Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I should probably update some of these things. ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter or ProfessorMesser.com/Instagram. We've also got, as I mentioned in the pre-show, a lot of activity on our YouTube channel right now. I think I've put about 40 videos out there in the last couple of weeks, all for Security Plus. So if you're planning eventually to study for the newest Security Plus, there's plenty of videos available there as well. So have a look at those sites, and there's plenty more we'll talk about as we go through the study group. The N10-008 is an exam version that was released on September the 15th of 2021, which means that we expect this exam to be around until about March of 2025. That means that if you're sitting here in November of 2023, you have plenty of time to study for your Network Plus certification. You don't have to worry about the rug getting pulled out from underneath you and not having the right exam to take. You are perfectly fine as far as that timing is concerned. We also want to let you know that the exam is a single exam. It's 90 minutes long. There are a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions, and you need to score a 720, which is on a scale from 100 to 900. So you've got an interesting scoring system there. CompTIA does not share how they score their exams. We don't know how they score their exams, at least not in any type of detail. All I can really recommend to you is that you do whatever you can to make sure that you are able to get those exams all locked in at that time. So make sure you work on those. The exam itself is multiple choice-based questions, which was very similar to the multiple choice-based question we just looked at, but they also ask you questions that are not multiple choice. Anything that's not multiple choice is qualified as a performance-based question. Performance-based questions can be fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt. It might be a drag and drop question. You might have a matching question. There are a lot of different types of questions we can do there. So you've got a number of things to think about on your exam. We'll talk about those, and we'll do a performance-based question here today. So you'll get a little bit of experience with those. We'll also let you know that we have much more than our training course on our website. There is our complete security or network plus success bundle, where you can get all of my videos in a downloadable form. You can get them in a physical format. There are course notes. I have so much more that are on there. We'll talk more about those course notes in a bit. I've got my copy of the course notes right here. You should think about getting a copy for yourself. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Also let you know that I have a video replay of this live stream that is available on YouTube immediately after we're done. We also have a podcast audio only version available. This is one that can be downloaded automatically into your podcast listening app. And if you'd like to add it, you can go to your favorite podcast listening index. Go out to Apple Podcast or whatever Google's calling their Google Podcast these days. And if you do that, you'll find my videos there. You can also find it on a number of streaming services. So if you're on Spotify, simply look for Professor Messer and you'll find us on Spotify. You can find, if you'd like this to be downloaded to your podcast listening program, you can find it at professormesser.com/podcast. So a little bit more to work through. Also, you'll notice about a day later that almost like magic, our entire study group will be indexed with detailed timestamps. So you'll know exactly when different questions and answers are being presented. Makes a very quick way to find things that you're looking for. This is in the YouTube video description, and it's because my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this video, hey, Lori, she is going through and listening to this whole thing all the way through and putting those timestamps in. So thanks, Lori. This is a fantastic thing to be working through. Hopefully you're someone who is if you're using these timestamps, this can be a great time savings if you're going through multiple study groups. So hopefully that'll be something that you will help with. This is also not the only thing that we do. When we're not here live, we have a Discord server. So if you'd like to chat with myself and other people who are studying for their Network Plus certification and many other certifications, you'll find it in our online community. That is at professormesser.com/Discord. There's nothing you have to pay for, nothing you have to do in there. It is where we always hang out when we're not here in our live stream. So it's a great way to get in touch with myself and other people who are working towards their certification. It's such a great community there. Also let you know that eventually you will need to take the exam. Now, you could purchase the exam voucher and pay for it on the CompTIA website, but that's at full price. Why would you pay full price? Well, if you're in US or Canada, I have discounted vouchers available on my site. You don't have to have a coupon code. There's no special extensions you need to put into your browser. You have a lot of content to go through here. And one of the things that will save you some money is that if you visit professormesser.com/vouchers. Also let you know we have an Exam Hacks ebook that you get for free when you purchase the voucher from my website. This is one where you can't get this with by purchasing it alone. It is only available with my success bundles or by purchasing a voucher from my site. And it's a set of tips and tricks that I've documented through my many years of taking these types of exams that give you some ideas of things that you can do during the studying process and strategies you can use during your exam to potentially get a better score. So another nice add-on that I've thrown in there, not only do you save money, but you get more when you visit professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which is a technician is using a multimeter when troubleshooting or during troubleshooting. In both of those cases, which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be verify the operation of a router interface, fasten a network wire to a wiring block, mirror traffic on a switch interface, create a wire map, or listen for an analog sound on a wire? And let's see how we did there. We have 56% of us that say we create a wire map with a multimeter. 20% say we verify the operation of a router interface. 18% said listen for an analog sound on the wire. And then you've got 4% that say mirror traffic on a switch interface. 0% say fasten a network wire to a wiring block. Nobody really chose that one. They didn't think that would be a good choice. And they were right. You really cannot fasten a network wire to a wiring block, at least not very well, with a multimeter. That would not be the most likely reason. I mean, you could use a multimeter as a hammer, but that would not be the most likely use of that particular tool. Multimeters are valuable tools. They can tell you about voltages, so you can see how much AC or DC voltage may be on a particular circuit, which is very useful if you need to check things like batteries or the amount of power coming out of an outlet. This is one that can really be useful. This is also a fantastic use if you need to determine if two wires are connected to each other, at least two ends of a single wire are connected to each other. We do that with continuity tests that are built into the multimeter. And this can be a great way not only to see, for instance, if a fuse is working accurately, but it's also one where you can perform a wire map. Let's say you have a cable that has a 25-pin connector on both sides. You can go to the first pin on one side of that cable, and then you use your multimeter to go through all of the other pins on the other side to see which one of those pins may or may not be connected to where you're plugged in on the other side of that cable. That allows you to incrementally create this wire map so you know exactly what pin on one side of the wire is connected to what pin on the other side of the wire. So that is the answer that we were looking for. Create a wire map. And if you were the 56% of you, I think this is a little better than we did last month, then that is the right answer. Verifying the operation of a router interface would be something that you would use with a loopback plug, for example. Loopback plugs are great for allowing information that's sent out an interface to be looped back into that interface, which you would run during a testing process to see if that interface is working properly. Listening for an analog sound on a wire is commonly used with an inductive probe, usually in conjunction with a tone generator. You put the tone generator on one side of the connection or one side of the cable, and then you use your inductive probe to see if you can hear the noise that's being transmitted over that wire. If you've ever been in a wiring closet and there are hundreds of cables, you'll come to love this tone generator and inductive probe so that you can easily find the cable that you need without having to go through some other process to track that back. Otherwise, you would be manually trying to find the cable and tracking it all the way through. They can really save you a lot of time with a tone generator and a probe. Sometimes we just refer to them as a toner probe, just as an abbreviation. Mirroring traffic on a switch interface is very useful for capturing data, but we don't use a multimeter to do that. Usually we can use a standalone tap or a mirroring function that is built into the switch itself. And as we've already seen, fastening a network wire to a wiring block is usually done with some type of connection device, especially for that wiring block. So this is one where the only option here for multimeters would be to create a wire map. I say the most likely reason. I guess given the different ways to use the multimeter, that really is the most likely way. And if you answered create a wire map, you got that one absolutely correct. Well, that was our first question of the month. That gives you an idea of the type of information that we'll be talking about. Now let's shift gears a little bit because, as we know, whenever we go into looking at the exam, when we sit down for the Network Plus exam, the first handful of questions you're going to get will not be multiple choice. This is an important thing to remember. Some people are taken by surprise at this. So the last question we looked at was a multiple choice-based question. So for example, there it is. There's multiple choices. You have a question and multiple choices that you can choose from. So I have for you a question that is not multiple choice. And as I mentioned earlier, CompTIA likes to call these performance-based questions. Our performance-based question of the month, I always do a brand new performance-based question every month. This one is about DNS. And this performance-based question asks, match these DNS record types to their description. And I have a number of different DNS record types, and then I have a number of descriptions to go through. The DNS record types are PTR, CNAME, SRV, and MX. So you have 4 to choose from. They are PTR, CNAME, SRV, MX. And I have, you'll notice, 6 different descriptions. Well, this means that 2 will be left over at the end. We'll have 2 that we won't use. This is a common strategy on the exam, by the way. So don't be thrown too much by this. You want to pick 4 of these descriptions to match up with those 4 DNS record types. For those listening in, those 6 different descriptions are: create an alias for an existing device name, define the DNS zone details, identify the FQDN of an IP address, publish a public key for email verification, determine the IP address of a Windows domain controller, and find the FQDN of an email server. Those are the 6 different descriptions for the 4 different DNS record types. Again, there will be 2 left over that we do not use when we work through that. So this is a performance-based question. This one, it's kind of hard to do matching online. So if you wanted to put in your answer as 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, you can do that. If you think that's what the answer is, it is not. It is a very different answer than that. But it's something you can easily type in to the answer if you want to submit your question. And of course, you can submit those questions over on Vevox. There's the vevox.app link. You can also use the professormesser.com/QA link. And you can see the ID that's on your screen is 183049493. We have a number of people putting in their answers right now. Let's see how you do with these. DNS record types are... They seem very archaic or difficult to understand. It seems like an odd set of terms, and I guess in some ways it is. DNS has been around for so long that it is a very well-seasoned type of configuration. And a number of these terms that we use don't seem to be immediately recognizable. But once you start working with DNS a bit, you'll find that it starts getting very, very common. You start recognizing these terms and these abbreviations very easily. The important part for your Network Plus exam, though, is that these record types and others are listed in the exam objectives. So make sure that not only you know not only these 4 different names of these record types and what they do, make sure you know the other types of records that are listed in the exam objectives. They will be very useful to you, and they will probably come up again in some way in the Security Plus as well. So you may be studying here, but then you're able to study for some other things. You're getting a lot more done once you are finished with this particular version of the exam. So that's something that might help you in the future. And ultimately, if you start working with DNS, this is going to help you a lot. So make sure you're familiar with that too. And as we always say in the world of networking, it's always DNS anyway. Whenever I've had people that I've worked with, and they said, oh, I just made this single change to the DNS server, and now everything is down. And in fact, just so you're aware, you can make changes to a DNS server that could effectively lock out your domain for an extended period of time to anyone. So that's why I tell people you could unintentionally set a value that would prevent anyone from seeing any changes to your DNS server for months or even a year or more. So this is one of those things where you do have to be very, very, very careful when making any type of DNS change. And it's always a good idea to have somebody else look at your change to see if it's something that you either did correctly or did not do correctly. I think it's always good to have a sanity check in there, especially when working with DNS. So let's see how we did with this one. We'll step through all 4 of these DNS record types, and we'll see how we do with them. Let's start with the PTR record. PTR seems like that would be printer. Whenever I see PTR, I think printer. It's not printer, it's pointer is what that DNS record stands for. This allows you to identify the fully qualified domain name of an IP address. Now, if you're thinking about a DNS server and how we normally use DNS, that's not what we normally do with a DNS server. Normally, we ask a DNS server, I've got this fully qualified domain name, what's the IP address? But DNS can also work in the reverse way. We can provide it with an IP address, and it will tell us a fully qualified domain name as long as there is a pointer record to that fully qualified domain name. And so if you need that reverse lookup feature, you will need to add a PTR record, a pointer record, into your DNS and make sure that you have that IP information defined in that particular config. So PTR, the pointer, is matched with identify, the fully qualified domain name of an IP address. Next on our list is the CNAME. That's different CNAME. This is a canonical name, and it's for creating an alias for an existing device name. This makes it very easy to create aliases. Very often there will be a single IP address that provides multiple services. So you might create a server. That server has a single IP address. That is our web server. It is also our DNS server. It is also an FTP server. It is also a mail server. And there could be other services loaded on that same device as well. Well, instead of having separate records in the DNS server, you can have these canonical names. That means that it's very much simplified when it comes to administration. What if you change the IP address of that server? You would have to go into a traditional DNS and change every single A record associated with that IP. Or if you're using CNAME, you just change one record, and that CNAME is now able to use that change across all of those different aliases. So it saves you a lot of time. It's an important record. CNAME is matched with creating an alias for an existing device name. Next on our list is the SRV. SRV is a service record and allows you to find different services on the network, even if those services don't necessarily have anything to do with DNS. A very good example of this, and if you work for a company that has an Active Directory server, then you have this record in the DNS of your Windows services so that people can find your Windows domain controller. The domain controller itself doesn't have a way to advertise itself to everyone who may be on this network, especially since many networks have different subnets. So instead of having some type of advertisement, you simply put a record in your DNS called the SRV record, and anybody who's trying to find the domain controller starts with the DNS server and asks, hey, where's the domain controller for this network? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Here's the SRV record, which documents the IP address. There you go. Go off and do your Windows domain controller login. That is the process that occurs every time when you're troubleshooting with Windows, especially if you're planning to get a Microsoft certification later on in your career. You'll probably run into that. It's one of the hardest parts of initially installing Windows Server is making sure you have all the DNS configurations correct. I never do. I always break it and I think, oh, wait, it's DNS, as we always know. And last, a record that we'll look at is the MX record. The MX record is a mail exchange record. So this allows you to find the fully qualified domain name of an email server. This is how we're able to send an email to someone who's on a different domain, even though we have no idea where that domain's email server happens to be. In fact, we don't really care. We just want it to find its way to the correct recipient's email inbox. So we will create a record in our DNS server that says, if anybody needs to find our mail server, here's where you'll find it. And we can put the fully qualified domain name, at which point the DNS server can also resolve the IP address for that particular mail server. So that's a pretty important record. So not only can we modify DNS and completely disrupt all communication to our network, we could make minor changes to the DNS and completely stop all email traffic to our network, which is almost worse in many ways. So the MX record, finding the fully qualified domain name of an email server. Now, there were two we did not use, and these do correspond to actual record types. So one is to define the DNS zone details. What record would be used with that? And the last one that we did not choose was publish a public key for email verification. So for extra credit, let's see if you can, at least in your mind, think what those might be. So defining the DNS zone details is the piece that's at the very beginning of most DNS servers. And we call it the start of authority record, or SOA. That start of authority has information in there that describes the domain that this DNS manages, has information like a serial number so that someone can refer to that start of authority, see a serial number, and if they notice the serial number has been updated, then we know that DNS has been modified in some way. So it's a very useful record to have right at the beginning of your DNS server. And lastly, we have publish a public key for email verification. Now I'm looking for the DNS record type, which means technically that's a text record, a TXT record type. And in that TXT record, we will put the DKIM information, the domain keys internet mail record, so that we know where is the public key that is used to digitally sign these email messages. It's a way for a recipient to confirm that those messages really did originate from a legitimate email server. And we use cryptography for that. Of course we do. We use digital signatures, and we use that public key to verify the digital signature that we're sending out with these emails. Those are just a few of the DNS record types that you need to know. Make sure you're familiar with not only the ones that are on this screen, make sure you're familiar with all of them that are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives, and you'll be able to ace any question you get about DNS records on your exam. Hopefully you did pretty well with that one. That was one of those types of questions where it can be challenging to find the right answer. So if you are able to get through all of those and at least get some of them right, you're heading the right direction. Make sure you make a note of any that you may have missed so that you can go back and look those up later. Let's now shift gears and do a question that is a traditional multiple choice based question. This question on my list asks, a network administrator is installing a device to forward traffic based on the destination IP address. Which of the following would describe this device? Is that a switch, proxy, repeater, router, or access point? A network administrator is installing a device to forward traffic based on the destination IP address. Which of the following would describe this device? Is it switch, proxy, repeater, router, or access point? So this is one where you have a number of different things to choose from here. If you think you know the answer, please don't put the answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/QA, the link that's right here on your screen, or you can go to the vevox.app link here, and you can see the ID of 183049493. Got a number of things that you can work through there. So hopefully this is one that you're familiar with. Obviously, understanding these different devices that you will run into when you walk into a big data center will be very important. And if somebody says, I need you to make a configuration change to the switch, to the proxy, to the repeater, to the router, or to the access point, you need to know what those things happen to be. So this is a good one where knowing what the answers are is going to be, or at least what the answers could be, will be an important part of not just the exam, but they'll be an important part of your day-to-day job as you work in networking. So have a look at those different options. A number of you have already locked in your answers. So let's see how you did. This question asks, a network administrator is installing a device to forward traffic based on the destination IP address. Which of the following would describe this device? Is it a switch, a proxy, a repeater, a router, or an access point? And we can stop this and see that 78% of you say the answer is router. About 15% of you say the answer is switch. And then we have 2% apiece that say proxy and repeater, and then only 1% or so say access point. That's a pretty strong answer, 78% saying router, but is that really the answer that we were looking for? Well, one of the things that you will become very familiar with when you start looking at routers, routing tables, static routing, and other types of configurations associated with the router is that it is looking at the destination IP address and making a determination of what the next forwarding should be for that particular information. So that is a very good example of why looking and understanding what device is making what decisions and how is it making those decisions becomes an important part of your troubleshooting process as well. So this is what routers do. They look at the IP address for the destination, just like someone who might be stopping in. I'm lost. Let me stop on the side of the road and ask somebody how to get to that location. They're going to forward me along. It's the same process used for a router. So hopefully that's one that you're familiar with. And if you're not familiar with the way routers work, I give you an extensive breakdown in my videos that describe how these different decisions are made and how they work inside of those. So hopefully that's a pretty good example for you of how this would work. For those of you that said switches, because we did have about 15% of you said that a switch makes its forwarding decision based on IP address. In actuality, you are very close. The switch does make forwarding decisions, but it's based on the destination MAC address, the media access control address. So that's why it's important to know what is the determining factor when deciding what that next step will be in the forwarding process. This is also why I use the term forward, because when we're switching, we tend to say that we are switching by MAC address. When we're routing, we tend to just use the term routing. We're routing by IP address. So that's a very good example of trying to find the right combination of terms and how they are used. So don't be thrown by that on your exam. When we talk about simply forwarding traffic, it could be forwarding by MAC address, it could be forwarding by IP address, and you need to know what the differences are and what devices are looking at when they make those forwarding decisions. So those of you that answered router, 78% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Could not be any better than that. Let's do some more multiple choice-based questions. I have another one for you that we can step through. This question asks, an administrator has received an alert showing a large number of dropped packets on the core router. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Is that a media converter, VPN concentrator, application proxy, load balancer, SNMP trap? An administrator has received an alert showing a large number of dropped packets on the core router. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Is it media converter, VPN concentrator, application proxy, load balancer, or SNMP trap? If you think you know the answer, follow the links on your screen at professormesser.com/QA or the links for Vevox.app. And please, as always, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. So we'll figure out what we're able to choose for this one. It's got to be one of them, right? That's the beauty of a multiple choice-based question, is that we have to figure out, and we can always take a guess. And I always recommend you do that. On the exam, one of the few things that we do know is that if you leave the question blank, you don't get any scoring for that question. But if you guess and you get it right, you get points. If you guess and you get it wrong, you just don't get any points. There's no penalty for guessing, in other words. So I always recommend that you find a way to go through and see if you can guess at, or at least put your best possible guess there, because there, in this particular case, is a 20% chance you'll guess right. On your exam, you usually get 4 answers to choose from. Sometimes that will change, but on many of the questions, it's 25% chance of getting it right. And I like those odds. So if you don't know anything, at least there's a sliver of a chance that you may be able to get it right. And if you can get rid of some of those answers and think, well, I know it's not that, and I know it's not that, your percentage goes up. So sometimes guessing is a really good idea. Make sure you consider that on your exam. So let's go through this question. It asks, an administrator has received an alert showing a large number of dropped packets on a core router. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this alert? Is it media converter, VPN concentrator, application proxy, load balancer, or SNMP trap? Let's see what you chose. And we can see that the answers we get are 62% of you that say it's SNMP trap. We have 21 or 22% that say it's load balancer. About 9% say application proxy. 4% say media converter, and only 2% say VPN concentrator. The important part of this question was really the one saying there was an alert. There was something that notified us that this particular router is dropping packets. That's a pretty important thing to know about, especially when it's on your core router. But how did we receive that information? Where did it come from? Well, it came from an SNMP trap. SNMP is the Simple Network Management Protocol. We use this all the time in network management to be able to query a device to see how well it's running. We can get health information, statistics on how it's forwarding information. There's a lot of details we can get from these devices. These SNMP MIBs, as we call them, the Management Information Base, is simply a database of all of the different statistics that we can gather from this device. And it's not unusual for a single device to have thousands of statistics that you can gather. Now, normally we don't gather thousands of statistics. It's just overkill for what we want. But we do go through and find the most important statistics for us. For example, if our core router was to start dropping packets, we might want to query that statistic so that maybe every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, we query that device to see if it's dropped any packets during that 15-minute period. Well, you may be thinking to yourself, but wait, that means that it might be 15 minutes before we even know that a problem exists. You're absolutely right. Having this reactive polling process is not one that provides you with very good real-time updates on what might be going on. So there is an aspect of SNMP that sends alerts and alarms proactively. We don't have to query the device. The device will simply send those updates to us without us even asking for them. And that's what we call an SNMP trap. I don't know why we don't call it an alert. I don't know why we don't call it an alarm. That's what we call it in the industry. But an SNMP trap is what the standard uses to define what that particular alert or alarm might be. Those are configured on the device. So sometime in the past, we logged into the router, the core router, and we told the core router, if you ever reach this particular threshold with this particular variable, send that trap to our SNMP management station. And when our SNMP management station receives that trap, it can then perform a number of functions. It can page people. It can send a text message. It can make a phone call. It can perform an API function. It can run a script. There are many different things that can happen at that point. The challenge is, of course, just knowing that it's happening to begin with. And that is why the SNMP trap can be so valuable, is that it provides us with an instant communication that something has happened so that we can get working on that problem immediately. SNMP trap is what we were looking for. We know that 62% of us did choose SNMP trap, so you got that one automatically. It's perfectly correct. We also have load balancers. We have 21% of you have load balancers as selected, but load balancers don't provide that feedback because load balancers don't know the health of the core router. They're not connected to the core router. They don't find any information that's in the core router. Load balancers are concentrating on spreading a load across multiple devices. If there was a problem with the load balancer, maybe we would have received that. But in this case, it was a set of statistics that were a problem on the core router. An application proxy is focusing on being a middleman between us and devices that we are working with. That does not provide us with feedback on packets that may be dropped from a core router. Media converters have very little reporting built into them, so it would have no idea whether packets are being dropped on the core router or not. And the same thing for VPN concentrators, which can tell you anything about how the VPN may be working, but has no idea of how the packets may be flowing across the core router. In this case, the source of the alert is going to be an SNMP trap, and 62% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as you can already tell, on this exam, there's a lot of content. In fact, if you look at the videos, there are 93 videos in my Network Plus course, which means that you have over 14 hours of content to go through to learn everything you need to know for this exam. And although I recommend you watch every single video and every minute of every video, I realize for some people that probably is not something they're able to do. There's too much time. Maybe they're focusing on different topics, or maybe they just don't have an interest in some of those topics. Whether you're watching all the videos or not, it would be nice to have a breakdown of the subnetting and the cabling and the VPN and the encryption and the topologies and the proxies and everything else in one single document. And that one document is a set of my Network Plus course notes. My course notes are designed to be a one-stop shop so that you can find everything that you need in the Network Plus course. In fact, here is the PDF of my Network Plus course notes. You can see that it has all of the text from the videos, all of the important graphics, all of the tables. I put it all in here. So if you're someone who's working on your Network Plus certification and you're trying to find one consolidated view of everything, you can use this. So hopefully that will give you some perspective on things that are important. I think if you're someone who is trying to learn all of this content and learn it, it's an amazing amount of information. It's almost overwhelming in some cases. So make sure that you have a look at the course notes. You can find out more about those on my website at professormesser.com/NPCN. And you have the choice between the digital PDF that you just saw or the physical printed version. They're obviously identical in content, but the printed one is one that you can now carry around with you in this physical form. If you choose to get the physical format, I can ship these to you worldwide. And when you purchase the physical format, you get the digital edition for free. You can download it immediately and start using it while you're waiting on your physical edition to be delivered. Have a look at those. They're at professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's do another question. I have more here that we can step through. This next multiple choice based question, it asks, a package of network transceivers has been delivered to a secure storage facility. Which of the following would best describe this delivery location? Is this an access control vestibule, a smart locker, an intermediate distribution frame, a cloud storage, or a locked data center cabinet? These are all real things. I didn't make any of this up, and they're all in the exam objectives. And again, the question asks, a package of network transceivers has been delivered to a secure storage facility. Which of the following would best describe this delivery location? Is this an access control vestibule, a smart locker, an intermediate distribution frame, a cloud storage, or a locked data center cabinet? If you think you know the answers, please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, use the links on your screen to go to professormesser.com/QA or use the Vevox.app ID that you see on your screen. Hopefully, this will get you thinking about where some of this information may have been delivered to. This is one where it is an exam objective. Some people were asking in a previous question, is that really on the objectives? It really is. Having those exam objectives is so valuable. If you don't have a copy of those objectives, make sure you grab those. You can get them from my site or simply Google CompTIA exam objectives. They're free and they have everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. They're a great checklist to use for people that are working towards earning their Network Plus certification. So make sure you're also familiar with all these terms. And if you don't recognize any of these terms, even if what you're looking at on the screen is or is not the correct answer, it's important that you still know what these topics are. So make sure you're familiar with every single one of them because they are real things that come from the real exam objectives. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a package of network transceivers has been delivered to a secure storage facility. Which of the following would best describe this delivery location? An access control vestibule, smart locker, intermediate distribution frame, cloud storage, or locked data center cabinet? And how did you do with this one? Oh, we're all over the place. We have an access control vestibule that came in first. It's really more of a three-way tie for first with 27%. Smart lockers, 26%. Locked data center cabinet, 25%. Then it drops off to 13% for an intermediate distribution frame and 8% for cloud storage. This is not the one that I thought we would be arguing about, that we would be fighting over. We're not fighting or arguing, but it's one where we have a number of different answers that we've chosen as the right answer. So in this case, we have ordered some network transceivers. Those network transceivers, we received a message that says your transceivers are now delivered. They are in the secure storage facility, which is a smart locker. These are lockers. You'll find them in public places. They might be at your local drugstore. There's one that's near me that's at a local grocery store. And you simply walk up. You can identify yourself on the screen of the smart lockers, and it will unlock the locker where everything has been delivered. This way, if there's let's say you work at a data center that is a nondescript warehouse building that has no delivery address identified on it. It does have an address, but nobody puts the address number on it. This is not unusual for data centers, by the way. We have a very important tendency not to advertise data centers. Think about it. Have you ever driven by and seen a sign that said Amazon data center? You'll never see it. You'll never see a sign that says company data center. We hide the fact that a data center is there. Well, how do you get things delivered if it's so difficult to even know where it is? Well, you can put down that you would like it delivered to the closest smart locker. And this is a very important thing. if you are trying to figure out where this stuff might be delivered. They can be in there with instructions. You put in a personal identification number or something that was provided by the person who sent the package, and then you can simply pick it up whenever you would like. They simply deliver it to one single place and be able to work through there. So it is a very common and increasingly common way to have things delivered, especially if you're trying to have things delivered to a site that's difficult to deliver to. Have it delivered to a site that is easy to deliver to, and that's what a smart locker is good for. And so we do have 26% of you that chose smart locker. You got that one absolutely right. The one that was the answer here that most people chose, 27%, say access control vestibule. This is actually a small room that is commonly set up. Since we were talking about data centers, you commonly see them in front of data centers, although I've gone through access control vestibules that were in the normal lobby of a building. And it is something where it is a place that's in the middle. You can sort of step into this middle room that's not on the outside of the building. It's not on the inside of the building either. It's kind of a middle ground. And inside of that access control vestibule, normally they will take your ID. They'll make sure that you do have an appointment in the building. They'll call your person that you're there to meet to come down and greet you. They'll come into the room and they'll take you out of the access control vestibule, or they'll take your ID and they'll give you an access badge and say, you're allowed in now, and you go on the other side. So because there are closed doors on both sides, they can limit who happens to walk through. So it's not something where somebody can simply walk behind you and keep walking. Everyone has to stop in this room. Everyone has to be validated. And only at that point are you able to continue through and walk out of the access control vestibule. It would not be a place where you would have anything delivered. It's not a delivery location. So it's something that would not best describe something delivered to a secure storage facility. If anything, it's very insecure because anybody can walk into the access control vestibule generally, but it's not a secure location, so not something you would do. The other big answer we got was 25% of us say a locked data center cabinet. All right, how is the mail person going to get into the data center, into a locked cabinet, to then put your transceivers inside of it? Not a very good option either, I don't think. I just hope they deliver my transceivers somewhere. Expecting them to get into a data center, into a locked cabinet, and somehow put them there, probably not something that's very, very possible in our world of delivery, at least not in the United States. Maybe other places, other countries have better delivery than we do here, but I think anyone would have a challenge getting into a data center and putting them into a locked cabinet. I just don't think that seems very viable. So would not best describe that delivery location. An intermediate distribution frame is an IDF. In the Network Plus, you learn about an IDF and an MDF, which is a main distribution frame. Again, these are kind of antiquated terms we use. The main distribution frame is sort of the centralized wiring point of the building. Very often it's in the main data center. An intermediate distribution frame these days is commonly associated with a remote wiring closet that may be on another floor. So the intermediate distribution frame is obviously connected to the main distribution frame, and there may be many intermediate distribution frames all connecting back to the main distribution frame. By the way, we hardly call them intermediate distribution frame or main distribution frame. Almost always the network team will say, did we put it in the MDF? Should we install it in the IDF? And when you hear those terms, you almost forget there's words associated with them. You use those abbreviations so much. But that wouldn't, an IDF is a very controlled area. We don't allow someone to drop packages into the IDF. We don't let anybody in the IDF because all of our wiring is there. There's usually switches in there. Some other infrastructure equipment's probably in there. Nobody should be going in there unless you are authorized to be in that particular wiring closet or that intermediate distribution frame. And then cloud storage. Cloud storage sounds like, wouldn't it be great if we could just have all our deliveries delivered into the cloud? But cloud storages don't work very good there either. So that's one of those where we can store files in the cloud. We can store configurations in the cloud. But unfortunately, we cannot have our network transceivers delivered to the cloud. I wish we could. That would be great. In this case, the answer we were looking for was a smart locker. 26% of you got that one absolutely right. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would be glad to send you an email that is digitally signed, that verifies that you were here watching this particular event. You can do this whether you're watching this live right now or whether you're watching this on a replay. In fact, if you're watching this on a replay, you must request this to be able to earn the CEU from CompTIA. So one of the things you can do is, or what you should do to earn that email, is you must follow these directions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. On that website, there's a Contact Us link. Click that Contact Us link, and it brings up a form, a message on the screen, a form, and put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put November 2023 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, please put the super secret code words of the month, Smart Locker. Smart Locker are the super secret code words of the month. So once you do that, you can also put anything else you would like into that message. I read through every single one of these and process them. So if there's anything you'd like to put in there about the process you're going through when you're planning to take the exam, I do like reading these things. So I'm not able to respond back to all of them because we get so many of them in every month. But it's a little something that makes the time go by a little better when I'm processing all of these different CEUs as they come through. This would obviously be something you can only use if you already have a CompTIA certification or if you're planning to use CEUs to renew a third-party certification. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put November 2023 Network Plus, and in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, Smart Locker. If you don't want to put anything else in there, that's fine. Just click send. That's all you have to do. And in about a week or so, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, I will get these back to you so that you're able to receive that. You'll get an email from me that has been digitally signed. The attachment will be in there with the digital signature, so you could even confirm that nothing in that message has been changed since the time I sent that message to you. Hopefully it's something that might help you, especially if you're planning to use CEUs to renew for this certification or any others. Well, let's do another question, shall we? I've got another one in the list here. Maybe we can bounce back from our Smart Locker question. This one asks, a network administrator is troubleshooting an issue with RSSI. Which of the following would best describe the nature of this issue? Is it wireless performance, DHCP services, DNS name resolution, asymmetrical routing, or speed and duplex? A network administrator is troubleshooting an issue with RSSI. Which of the following would best describe the nature of this issue? Is it wireless performance, DHCP services, DNS name resolution, asymmetrical routing, or speed and duplex? If you think you know the answer, use the links on your screen to log in and put down what you think the answer might be. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/QA or follow the links to the Vevox app that is on your screen as well. We've got a few choices there. And see if you know what these are. This is sort of an abbreviation knowledge question, yes, but it's one where we have to know what it could possibly be. And yes, I spend a lot of time trying to find the right way to ask the question so that it also fits a lot of different options for answers. So hopefully you're familiar with this acronym. If you're not familiar, this might be a little more challenging, but maybe you can work it out. So we'll see how you do with working out that particular answer. These questions are, they're designed to prepare you for the exam. I can't say that these are a perfect representation of what you might see on the exam, but in many cases, they do provide you with some insight into things you have to think about for questions that might be on the exam. That was an important part of this, of course, as we go through these study groups, is preparing you for the types of things you might see on the exam. And I think this is a good example of what that is. We have a number of people that answered this one, so let's see how we did with this. A network administrator is troubleshooting an issue with RSSI. Which of the following would best describe the nature of this issue? Is it wireless performance, DHCP services, DNS name resolution, asymmetrical routing, or speed and duplex? Now, let's see how you did with this one. The answers that you chose were wireless performance got 77% of the vote. And the next most popular response is asymmetrical routing at 11% of the vote. We have 5% for speed and duplex, 4% for DHCP, and 1% for DNS. I got this switched around because I thought there would be fewer people answering right on this one and more people answering right on the smart locker one, which gives you an example of how I really have no idea sometimes how you're going to answer some of these. So the question here is about RSSI. And if you're someone who is troubleshooting a wireless network, you're probably very familiar with RSSI because that stands for Received Signal Strength Indication. And that's how you know how strong a signal happens to be. So you can look at the RSSI statistics. Let me move my head out of the way here. This is the statistics that are on my computer. I just did a screenshot of this so I could see what they are. This is the access point that I use in my studio. And you can see that it gives me information about the IP address of that device, what type of security. The security has been upgraded on that since then, since I took this screenshot, thankfully. The BSS ID for this device, the channel that is currently being used. So I'm not even using 5 gigahertz at this point on this device. Today, I absolutely am. And you can see it has a statistic here for RSSI, and you can see it's negative 36 decibels. So this is one where if you are somebody trying to work through this, decibel milliwatts is the standard that we use here because it's a comparison of the decibels as related to a 1 milliwatt transmission. So the farther away you get from the antenna, the less signal you're going to receive. That almost seems intuitive, right? So the farther away you get, the less signal strength you're going to have. And we represent that loss of signal strength with a negative value. Again, that makes perfect sense. And you can see that the values that we have here, the signals, the received signal strength that we're getting from that access point is negative 36 decibel milliwatts. And you can see that if we were looking for the underlying noise on the line, the noise is way down there at negative 90 decibel milliwatts, dBm. So this is a very good idea of how you can measure to a very specific value what the signal strength happens to be. Because if you look at most representations of signal strength on a wireless network, it will tell you signal strength good, signal strength fair, signal strength poor, well, which is, I guess that's okay. It gives you some idea. But when we're troubleshooting a wireless problem, we need better metrics. We need better statistics than simply good, medium, fair, poor, or otherwise. And if we can get actual measurements of the signal strength and compare those measurements as we walk around, we can create a very good survey of a particular area of what's there and how we're working with it. So a very good idea if you're somebody working on this. So a good example of some of these is a logarithmic scale. And if you wanted to put those into certain categories, a negative 50 is excellent, negative 70 is good, negative 80 is low. You kind of get the idea from there. And so you may be able to simply look at an RSSI value and know how well you're receiving data just by examining those numbers. It can be very, very valuable. And that's why wireless performance is the right answer. If you are the network administrator and troubleshooting an issue associated with RSSI, you're troubleshooting a wireless problem. That's what you are working through. Other answers here, like asymmetrical routing, would not be RSSI. You would simply see that traffic was not able to be routed properly. Maybe it was being dropped by a firewall. Firewalls are stateful devices, and asymmetric routing tends to cause these devices to go crazy unless you take that into account when you're engineering your firewall. But RSSI would not be found with a routing problem. We have DHCP services was 4%. DHCP services are not wireless services, so they don't have an RSSI value associated with them. Speed and duplex is simply the speed of the network. Do you have it configured for 10, 100, 1000, 10 gig? And the duplex is either half duplex or full duplex. None of those have anything to do with RSSI. And then lastly, DNS name resolution. Even though I tell you it's always DNS, turns out sometimes it's not always DNS. So it's always DNS until it isn't. And in this particular case, it's RSSI, which would only be associated with a wireless network. If we chose wireless performance, we got that one absolutely right. Well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I think we can fit in one more question, can't we? I think we should. So let's do one more of these questions. This next question asks, this one right here. Well, let's see if you can see it. There we go. Now you can see it. And the question asks, a network administrator is installing a 10 gigabit Ethernet link using fiber. Which of the following would describe this network standard? Would that be 10G base T, 1000 base LX, 100 base FX, 10G base LR, or 10 base T? These are all Ethernet standards you need to know from your exam objectives. A network administrator is installing a 10 gigabit Ethernet link using fiber. Which of the following would describe this network standard? Is it 10G base T, 1000 base LX, 100 base FX, 10G base LR, or 10 base T? Do you think you know the answer? Go to the links on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer that, lock in your answer, and see how you did with this one. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these standards. This might be a good one to be able to break down. Hopefully you're familiar with these standards. You need to know all of these. All of the standards that are listed here are from your exam objectives. So make sure you know about it. Make sure you're familiar with it. And that's something I think that would be very, very useful, is knowing not just the ones on this screen here, but all of the ones that are listed in the exam objectives. Should be a good one to be familiar with. Let's see if you happen to know what it is. A lot of you already locked in your answers. I feel like a lot of you know this one. I try to look at how fast people are answering. I take a guess as to whether they're able to know this one or not know this one. So let's see how we did with this particular question. It asked, a network administrator is installing a 10 gigabit Ethernet link using fiber. Which of the following would describe this network standard? Is it 10G base T, 1000 base LX, 100 base FX, 10G base LR, or 10 base T? And let's see how you answered this one. Well, we can see that 59%, I'm going to say 60% of you say the answer is 10G base LR. 25%, a quarter of you say it's 10G base T. We've got 8% that say 100 base FX. We have 4% that say 1000 base LX. And the one that I thought more people would choose is only 3% of you chose 10 base T. So if we had to go with the majority here, we would choose 10G base LR. And if you were to look at gigabit Ethernet over fiber and what we do with 10 gig using fiber, you would see that we have a couple of standards that are commonly used for 10 gig communication over fiber optics. One of these, and there are many different ones, by the way, but these are two very common ones, is 10G base SR. And if you wanted to think about SR, SR stands for short range. So that is a very good example of why we would have that in as short range. Maybe that gives you some familiarity or you can remember it a little bit better. It works over multi-mode fiber and it runs for about 400 meters, depending on what fiber you're using. There's different fiber standards. You would need to look at the 10G base SR standard to be able to know what type of fiber can I use and what is the length of the fiber that I can use based on that particular standard. The standard has everything in it. So if you're ever wondering, am I doing this particular installation up to spec, you can always go to the standard to be able to see what that is. You also have 10G base LR, which we tend to refer to as long range. Those abbreviations they have at the end there are, as IEEE has told us, are just letters. They don't technically stand for anything, but I put on their long range just to make it a little bit better to remember. This commonly uses single mode fiber, and you see that it can go up to approximately 10 kilometers as the maximum range, as documented in the 10G base LR standard. Again, we go back to those standards every time we want to know what those happened to be. So in our case, we had a number of different choices available. Our 10 gigabit Ethernet link using fiber, we now know one of the answers, the answer that we were looking for here was the 10G base LR, long range. That's certainly fiber. It is a fiber standard, and it's running 10 gigabit networking. That is the answer that we were hoping for, and 60% of us or so got that one absolutely right. So hopefully you're familiar with those standards. You know what they are. Now, we had about 25% of you that chose 10G base T. That is a 10 gigabit network. So you were halfway right. But the T on the end of this indicates that it's using twisted pair. And so this is a copper standard for 10 gigabit networking. This particular question asks for 10 gigabit Ethernet link using fiber. So therefore, anything that is twisted pair would not fall into that category. Unfortunately, 10G base T, not a correct answer. Along those same lines, we have 10 base T, which seems like it could be 10 gigabit, but in fact is 10 megabit. So quite a difference in the speeds here. This is one of the earliest versions of Ethernet. And again, it is a twisted pair running 10 megabits per second. It's unlikely any of you have a 10 megabit switch or route, or at that point, switch, router, or a hub inside of your network. If you do, it's probably time to upgrade just a little bit. 10 base T is indeed twisted pair using copper, so it could not be the answer to this one, which is really looking for a fiber standard. So there's two other fiber standards that are here, 1000 base LX and 100 base FX. These are also listed in the exam objectives, but because it's 1000 base as the beginning, that's a gigabit or a 1000 megabit network speed. That's not 10 gig. It's only 1 gig. So 10 times slower than a 10 gig network. And then 100 base FX is a 100 megabit standard. Both of those use fiber, but they're a different speed of a network. They're completely different standards. They do not run 10 gigabit network. They are only running 1 gigabit and 100 megabit. So the answer here, the only one that applies, is indeed 10G base LR. If you were one of the 59, I would say 60% of you that chose that answer, you got it absolutely right. Well done. That was the answer. That's the one we were looking for, and that is the standard that you would need to be able to work through that. As I mentioned, those standard names that are here, those abbreviations don't technically stand for anything. So don't try to lock in something as that abbreviation really means that thing, because as you'll find when you look at other standards dealing with networking, those terms don't necessarily work that same way across all of those. So try not to lock in, but they can be good things to help you remember, especially if you're planning to use this on your exam or know this for your exam. So all of the information we looked at today came from the exam objectives. These exam objectives are valuable. They tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. And I will say, if you know everything that's listed in the exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. That's how sure I am of what is contained within those objectives. And they're free to download. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and you can download all of those exam objectives and be able to use them right away. Very useful, very valuable, and they should be something you should already have. If you don't have them, get them right away and be able to use them for your exam. Also let you know that we do one of these study groups every month. Although we're not done today, we still have another hour of Q&A where you can ask me questions for the exam. But we do this once a month, and our next Network Plus study group is on December the 13th. We're back to a Wednesday study group, so make sure you make a note of that. Of course, if you go to professormesser.com/calendar, you can find us there. We also have an events channel on our Discord. So if you're in our Discord, it also has a list of all the events there as well. I need to add the December events to that, and I'll be doing that over the next day or two. So you come on back in December. Of course, we still have another Security Plus study group next week at this same time. And in December, you can see that we have A+ study groups on the 5th and the 7th. There's another Security Plus study group on December the 20th. So there's always something going on. If you want to know when the next live event is going to be, always check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, the part where I ask you questions in our main study group is done, but don't worry, we've got a lot more to go through today. I'm going to open up the Q&A on our Vevox app and have you ask questions. In the meantime, don't forget about our Success Bundle. You can find it at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Also, don't forget about our vouchers, which of course come with a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook an ebook that you cannot get anywhere else. You can only get it with the Vouchers or Success Bundle, cannot be purchased on its own. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, don't forget about our Discord, our YouTube, our Twitter, our Instagram, our LinkedIn, or anything else. You can go to professormesser.com/ the name of that social media site to find us. So professormesser.com/Discord, /YouTube, /Twitter, /Instagram is a great way to find out what's going on here. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of where you might find things that we are working on this side. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our first hour. Stick around for our next hour, where I will be taking questions from you. We'll talk more about that in a minute. In the meantime, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. All right. Okay. Let's see if I can get myself back on the screen here. There we go. It's got to be one of these buttons, right, to be able to work through them. Hopefully that's something that you're familiar with, being able to work through these. Let me adjust things on this side. Now it's time for some Q&A. So I'm going to get rid of this information on the screen so that you can participate in our Q&A. To be able to do that, you can submit questions for this second hour of the study group at any time. And you do that from our Vevox app. You can see here that we're going to be moderating the questions as we go. So you can submit those questions. You'll notice they don't appear on the screen. You may have no idea whether they're in there or not, but they are. I can see everything on my side. If you'd like to submit a question, it's also in Vevox. You can find that in the Vevox app. Or, of course, you can go to professormesser.com/QA and submit the questions from that Vevox front end as well. The ID, of course, same as before, 1-830-49493, that information that's on the screen. So you can find out where to submit those questions, maybe something. And we've already got some questions that have come in. So now I get to go back to my Vevox front end and have a look at the Q&A and see what questions have come through. So I think this is a pretty good place to go for some of these things. And you guys are very good at adding more questions and putting more questions in here. And you always give such great feedback and information to put in here. So thank you for doing that. Let's see what we have in this list, and we can kind of address those and go through them. There are a few of these that look pretty good. So let's start with one that's more of a career direction question, which I think would be a good one to choose from. This is from Ace, who asks, is it recommended to get the trifecta going for a help desk job or a field service technician job, or would I be overqualified? First, I want to tell Ace that you're already very smart to be thinking this way. Not many people have an impression or an understanding of what an overqualification might be, and it is important, especially as you're beginning your career, to properly position yourself in any particular role that might be available. You never want to walk in with more credentials than what they're asking for, at least not well exceeding the credentials that they're asking for. That is something I think a lot of people miss when they're thinking about this. I think from a perspective of someone who's working towards being a knowledgeable technician, you would think that being more knowledgeable would be more qualified. And that is true to some degree, but it is not true when it comes to finding the right person for a particular role. And as a former hiring manager, I can tell you this is an important consideration. Let's, for example, say that you've gotten your A+, your Network Plus, and Security Plus. These are three very good entry-level certs that give you a strong foundation that you can use to start your career, or perhaps even move up a bit in your career, and certainly position you for getting additional certifications as you go through your career. Now, one of the things you don't want to do if you're trying to find a job, let's first talk about what you should be doing. So when you look at a job posting, you will see that the job posting has a list of things they would like you to know. And this may be, we would like you to be knowledgeable with Active Directory. We would like you to have an A+ certification. We would like you to have a Network Plus certification. And maybe they also talk about a couple of other technologies. Maybe we like you to have knowledge of Windows, maybe knowledge of Linux. So they specifically listed out at least two certifications in the job posting. They listed A+, and they listed Network+. Now, let's say that you've been working towards these certifications for a while, and you got really excited about the certifications, and you got an A+, a Network+, a Security+, you got the entry-level Amazon certification, and then you jumped in, you really like the networking stuff, so you went ahead and you got your CCNA from Cisco, which is clearly an intermediate level. That is not an entry-level certification. So you've now got this listing of certifications, and you put your resume in for this position, and you don't get a response, or they reject you completely because they've seen that you not only have A+, Network+, maybe Security+ would have been a good one to throw in there, but now you've got a CCNA. And as a hiring manager, I'm looking at this and thinking an entry-level help desk position for somebody who's already been through CCNA is not a very good fit. They're going to be very bored in this job because the entry-level jobs are things you're doing entry-level work. You're taking calls from people, you're resetting passwords, you're identifying when problems occurring, you're sending those tickets to people who can assist with those particular problems, and you're not really doing any type of switch configuration, router configuration, you're not doing network troubleshooting, you're not installing switches, you're not installing routers, you're not dealing with dynamic routing, you're not setting up OSPF, you're not doing any of the things that you learned with your CCNA. And if I saw that on a resume, I'd think, this is not going to be the right job for this person. In 2 months, they're going to decide, I'm well above this. I've already surpassed this knowledge. I'm going to try to find something else. Or they're not going to be very good at their job just because they're bored at their job. And so that overqualification becomes an important consideration. If anything, if that was the same person who was applying to this job, maybe you don't mention the Amazon cert. Maybe you don't mention the Cisco cert, and you focus on, I am the person for this job because I have an A+, I have a Network+, and I went ahead and got the Security+, whether that might apply to this job or not. I think that is the right amount of qualification. You're not overqualifying yourself. You're saying, I meet your requirements and I know a little bit more, not a lot more, and here's why I would be good for this position. So I think that's an important part of this, is that this is the process that you go through in hiring. And if there was ever a better use of the term gatekeeping, people use gatekeeping as a negative term. This is where gatekeeping is a very positive term. They don't want to put you in a position where you're going to be bored with this job either. So you're trying to have a good love connection here. You're trying to have a perfect match between the objectives of the organization and what you know. And I have a couple of videos. They're in this YouTube video description that are 5 reasons your resume gets rejected. Then at a follow-up to that one, 5 more reasons your resume gets rejected. And those 2 are very good at positioning how you should present yourself to any particular job posting. So not only is it up to you to find jobs that fit your requirements, it's also up to the hiring manager and that hiring company to find people who meet their requirements. And there has to be a connection in there somehow. That's why I will often say, I have another video in this YouTube video description of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And I step you through the things that a hiring manager looks for. And sometimes that is a certification. Other times you know someone who works there. And that is a very, very powerful way in the door, at least to get an interview, is that you know someone who is already part of that organization. So sometimes it's not even about what we know or how qualified we are or what certifications we bring to the table. Sometimes they know who you are. And they know if you know this person, you must be a pretty good person to talk to. Let's find out how much you know and how you would do with that one. So I think that's a very good question, but it's something that I think the trifecta works perfectly for help desk, but it always comes down to the job posting itself. So look at the job posting. And if you go through those videos of why your resume keeps getting rejected, I talk about why a cover letter is so important. And I give you an example of a very useful and powerful and functional cover letter. Functional cover letter. Not just a cover letter that, thank you so much for the ability for me to put in my resume for this position. I feel that I would be valuable in this role. Thank you again. Sincerely, Professor Besser. That is the worst cover letter ever. What a waste of time. You had an opportunity to tell that hiring manager something about yourself or your skills that matched what they were looking for, and you blew it. You missed the entire opportunity because they actually read the cover letters. There are cover letters that can be incredibly valuable. So make sure you go through the process of understanding how to do a good cover letter, how to do a cover letter that makes a difference. These are things that are a most important part of this. So whether you are qualified or not qualified really comes down to what the employer is looking for. Hopefully the job posting they've created gives you that information. Maybe they don't specifically state these certs, but they talk about the things involved in those certs, and that would be a good way to do this. So I think putting down the trifecta for a help desk job is a perfect match in most cases, but make sure you look at the job posting to see exactly how that particular match might apply. Let's go through another question. That was a great question, Ace. Thanks for sending it in. Since we were just talking about a CCNA, I think this is a good place to bring up this question from Dennis, who asks, is Network Plus somewhat equivalent to CCNA? These are two different certifications. There is no equivalency in any type of comparison between certs. There quite simply is not. Every certification has its own skill set or its own emphasis that is different than any other certification out there. Otherwise, it would just all be one cert and we'd be done. So for CCNA, for those of you not familiar, is the Cisco Certified Network Administrator. It is generally one of the primary certifications people look for when they are hiring network administrators or network designers, that type of thing. Usually network design takes you beyond CCNA, but they want to see that you have those skills anyway. But if you're getting into switch administration, router administration, doing anything on the network side, generally the network team would like you to have something that is a CCNA or something very similar to it. And as I mentioned earlier, the CCNA is not an entry-level cert. It is an intermediate-level cert. It is the next step up from an entry-level cert. I would never tell somebody, stop working on the Network Plus, go to the CCNA, or vice versa. Stop working on the CCNA, go to Network Plus, because they are not compatible that way. The Network Plus has its own skill set with its own topics. And in fact, there are topics on the Network Plus that don't appear on the CCNA. People often don't consider this because the Network Plus is designed to give you a foundation of networking, an understanding of the basics of networking, understanding of packets and routes and security on the network and what switches and routers functionally do. It is a very good foundation of those particular topics. CCNA is you taking a switch out of a box and from scratch configuring that switch with a very specific configuration. Same thing for a router. Or when you lose the password to a router, how do you get into that router and reset it and change the configuration again? If there's a problem connecting devices across the network, how do we troubleshoot that very detailed router or switch configuration setting? You know, that is the CCNA. As you can tell, it's very different than Network Plus and the things that we're doing here. So I would say when people start talking about equivalency between those two, there is none. There is not equivalency between the Network Plus and CCNA. They are very different. It's a very good example of what we just talked about, how we want to be able to have the right credentials for the job in front of us. And if we walk into a help desk job and we say, I don't have a Network Plus like you asked, I have the CCNA, you may have just overqualified yourself. It may be actually worthless for that particular job. You need to make sure the credentials match the job. And if you do that, you'll be fine. So this may be a very good example of where having both the Network Plus and CCNA may actually be more advantageous in some situations. So have a look at that. Give, at least from a perspective, from my perspective, that's how I view both of those. I think it's a pretty accurate way for doing this. So hopefully something you're familiar with. Let's do another question. I've got more that have been listed here and things that we have been working on. Others here, there was another example of a question along these lines. It's not on the screen, but we'll answer this one anyway. This is from the chat room where Lester says, can I use an N10-007 book to study for the latest Network Plus exam? And I would highly, highly recommend that you not do that. In fact, I often say never study from exam materials that are different than the exam version you're going to take. And from the perspective of 007 to 008, let me give you some practical information on why you should not do that. So I'm going to pull up my statistics that I create. I do this for every exam where I look at the objectives for one version and I compare it to the next version. So I grabbed all of the N10-008 objectives and I counted them. There are 588 objectives in the 008 exam. Now, in the 007 exam, there were 499, let's say 500 objectives. So the size of both of those is pretty comparable. They're almost the same size, 500 in the 007, 588 in the 008. That's almost the same. So it's a little bit more, obviously, in the 008. The important thing to remember, though, is that when they make these changes, they throw a lot of information out and they bring a lot of information in. So although the objectives are similar in scope and size, the specifics are very different. And here's the important number. The new objectives in the 008 are 235 new objectives. That means in the 008, 40%, technically 39.97% of the exam is brand new. That is not in your 007 book. So take 40% of your book, rip it out. So that's a worthless process, by the way. Going through the 007, if you were to walk in the exam having only studied the 007 book, 40% of the exam will be this unknown thing that you've never seen before. That's a huge number. And it is almost insurmountable on an exam. It's certainly not your best approach to this exam. So I would highly recommend that you only study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. That is incredibly important. And if you are someone who is working towards your certification, why would you walk into the exam less prepared? You need to be as best prepared as you can be. And quite honestly, the cost of a Network Plus book is relatively small compared to the cost of taking the exam again. So there may be some good cost justification for that as you're going through that process. Let's go through other questions. So many interesting questions this month that we are never going to see on the screen. So thank you for submitting those. Let's do this in some other ways. Let's break this down in another view of this. So we have some that are here in this. Since we were just talking about this, I think that's worth talking about is as Dee says, well, this overqualification thing is it sounds real. So how do we overcome the overqualification? Well, if you've read a job posting and you really believe this job posting matches my skill set, and you really do believe that, maybe you're looking for an entry-level position into the industry. Let's say you're looking for that first help desk position. Maybe it's in a network operations center. Maybe it's a security operations center. So that's a NOC and a SOC. Maybe it is just a generic help desk at an organization, but you're looking for that first step in, which is usually, they don't pay great. They are usually the lowest level, but these are the positions where you get your foot in the door. And one of the things I often tell people when it comes to technology, you can move up very quickly. If you are very knowledgeable, you're driven, you push yourself and you learn quickly, and you push yourself to learn quickly, you can move out of the help desk and into desktop administration, network administration, cloud administration, even some security roles right out of the help desk. So this is not something where I think a lot of people will look at that first position in IT and say, well, my job bartending makes more than that. I'll stick with bartending, which everyone else who's up for that job thanks you, but you don't stay in those lower level positions very long in this industry. If you're there 6 months or a year, that's a long time. I popped out of my help desk position, that first corporate help desk position, I was out of it in 9 months. And immediately when you move up, you make more money. So you can rapidly move up through the ranks depending on different things that are happening. So the question we go back to is, how do you overcome the overqualification? Well, if you really believe the position that you're applying for matches your knowledge and where you are in the industry, simply don't tell them about the overqualification. As I said, maybe you got very, very industrious at the beginning and you got your A+, your Network Plus, your Security Plus, an Amazon cert, a Microsoft cert, the CCNA, and now you're working towards another one. Well, simply tell them about the first three. If it matches what they were looking for in their post, and say, yes, I have the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, which I feel fits perfectly for the requirements that you've written for this position. And they should say, you're right, that does fit our requirements perfectly. Now, they don't know that you have a CCNA and an Amazon cert and a Microsoft cert and a Linux cert or whatever else you've gotten because you were driven and you thought more certs means better. You just don't tell them. Just don't let them know, because in reality, you're not going to use that knowledge anyway until you move out of the help desk. And quite honestly, you need that foot in the door. Now, if you really believe that this job posting you're looking at doesn't match your requirements, maybe you can find a different position. But as we often know in this industry, you don't usually have that level of flexibility. You're looking for a job that matches some level of your knowledge. You will never have a job that uses 100% of your knowledge anyway. So it's not important that you wow them with your certifications, because in reality, you're not wowing them, you're pushing them away. And overqualification is a significant problem. Do not push away one of your employers. You want to have a perfect fit into that particular role. So that's why I mentioned that. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. Let's do that. Here's one that talks more about renewal. Renewal is an important consideration. If you earn your Network Plus certification or your A+ or your Security Plus or many of these other CompTIA exams, they're good for 3 years. You have 3 years of a valid cert. And sometime during that 3 years, you would need to renew that certification to have another 3 years of validity. So this is important. You don't want to spend all this time studying Network Plus, pass the exam, and then 3 years from now, you lose the cert. And you would have to take the exam again to be able to renew it. You could do that. Some people do take the exam again to renew their certs, but there are much easier ways to renew your certification. If you go to the CompTIA website, and that's maybe what we'll look at here. The question asks, I think I read there was a limit to the number of CEUs that you can earn from specific training types. And that is absolutely the case. So let's go to the CompTIA website and let's look specifically at renewals, because I think that is where we will find everything. One of the challenges is that there are so many different ways to renew your certification. And the renewal options on the CompTIA site are split into a number of different categories. One is, let's go to how to renew, and you'll see what those categories are. We can renew with a single activity, and that might be taking the CompTIA CertMaster CE, earning a higher level cert, earning a non-CompTIA cert, passing the latest version of the exam. I just mentioned that. And there's a number of options there. Or it can be multiple activities, and this is where the CEUs come into play. With the multiple activities, you can go through the process of participating in IT events, publishing your own blog posts or other types of publishing, work experience that you have, different training sessions that you have. All of these are associated with the CEUs. So let's, for example, look at training in higher education. So for example, you're attending a live webinar right now. If you're watching this, it's also an on-demand webinar, but that's how they qualify it here. And for that live webinar, for the Network Plus exam, there's live webinar and there's Network Plus, you can earn up to 6 CEUs by attending a live webinar for Network Plus. So as you probably know, you need a lot more CEUs for Network Plus. You need 30 CEUs to renew your Network Plus certification. By attending one of these live events or on-demand events, you earn 1 CEU for every hour. That means you could watch 6 of these and get 6 CEUs that you could apply to that 30 that you need in a 3-year period. So as much as I would love it if you could simply watch 30 of these and you could get everything you need to earn your cert, you cannot do that. You can only earn up to 6. And then you'll have to do other things. You'll have to complete a training course, which, by the way, gives you 30. You don't even have to watch my live events. That makes me sad, but watch it anyway. You've got attending a conference, can earn up to 6. Completing a college course earns up to 30. Completing an ACE course, that's the American Council on Education. I don't know. There it is. It's 30 CEUs. And so you've got other options. So yes, your CEUs may be limiting how many you can earn of a particular type. You have to make sure that you earn the right amount if you are someone collecting CEUs. That's why I often tell people, maybe we shouldn't earn CEUs. Maybe you should just take Cert Master CE. And this is one of the reasons I think the Cert Master CE is so popular. As you recall, it's in that first section where you renew with a single activity. Already this sounds better. If we complete a Cert Master CE course for Network Plus, this is a course where you must have passed the exam by passing the N10-007 or earlier, and you take this online course. It's 8 to 10 hours, depending on your knowledge. It's $189, and you don't have to pay any CEU fees. So it's only a little bit more expensive than your annual CEU fee. But if you don't have to pay that CEU fee, you save a little money. And you simply go through this. So you could do this in a day. If you were at the last day before your certification was to be expired, and I have 24 hours, I can't let this certification expire. What do I do? Well, you take Cert Master CE for Network Plus. You spend a day going 8 to 10 hours. You have to answer questions in this application, in this computer-based training. You have to make sure that every question is answered correctly. And if you don't, you just do it over again. So there's no penalty there. You answer all the questions correctly. You click, yes, I did it. It automatically submits it to CompTIA, and you're renewed for another 3 years. And we've had people come to our website that said, tomorrow's the last day. What do I do? I can collect a bunch of CEUs. And I go, you're never going to get enough. You'll never find enough CEUs unless you've taken a course, unless you've gone to training. We go through those options. They go, I haven't done any of those. What do I do? You go take the Cert Master CE, you put out the $189, and you're renewed for another 3 years. And in their case, they did that. They went through it. They passed it. They submitted it. They were now renewed. So that's another thing you can do. It's a little bit faster than going through the process of trying to hunt down all of these CEUs. But some people like collecting CEUs, and I like giving them. So hopefully that can be something you can work on as well. A lot of different options for renewing. Just find the one that works best for you. Let's do some more questions. Other questions. Let's see what type of details have been put in here. This is an odd question. It's also from Dennis. I have a feeling this was pulled from one of his classes or from a book that he has, but we'll talk about the difference between a book and the difference between a class and the real world, I guess. Dennis asks, on a screen subnet, the second firewall, the one facing the internal company's network, must have a rule that accepts communication from the first firewall? How does that work? This is something I see written up a lot, is that first let's talk about a screened subnet. For those of you not familiar with the term, we used to call this a DMZ, demilitarized zone, where you would have, of course, there's the outside of your network, the internet, the wild west of computing. Obviously, we don't want the internet directly connected to our internal network. That could be very, very bad. But we don't want to directly connect the outside world to the inside world with just a single thing happening in the middle. We need something in the middle where maybe we can put other services so that we can have people from the outside access those services. But when they access those services, they're not coming on the inside of our network. They're in this middle ground, a demilitarized zone of sorts that we now call, in a much more appropriate way, a screened subnet. So the screened subnet is this center ground where we can put our web server, for example. And if anybody from the outside needs to access our web server, they go onto this screened subnet VLAN or network, and they never come to the inside of our network, which is ideal. In every network design that is in use today, in the real world, I hate using that term, but the way that we implement these in practice is with a single firewall. There's a single firewall, and you have a connection coming in from the internet. You plug in another VLAN or network for your screened subnet, and then you plug in another connection for the inside of the network. And you can even plug in other connections as well. Our modern firewalls can have many tens of connections, even hundreds of connections on the physical interfaces that you can plug into them. And it's not unusual to plug in 3, 4, 5 different networks into a single firewall. It would be very unusual. It would be remarkably unusual, to the point that I've never implemented any configuration with a screen subnet that had 2 firewalls. That's not true. I have one company that did this, and it's not for a screen subnet. It was for a different reason. We could talk about that. Primarily because firewalls are super expensive. They cost money. And one of the things is, if you can do it on one device and it's just as secure, why don't you do that? And that's what they do. So most common implementations of a screened subnet are all on one firewall. Now, I realize that in the purposes of sort of learning the concept and having something to design on the screen or on your board in class, is that sometimes we will have 2 separate firewalls. And in fact, in the old days, we would do it that way. There would be a bastion firewall that would be in the outside. Then you'd have an internal firewall that protect. That is so old school that hasn't been done in 25 years or more. We don't do it that way. It doesn't work that way. But let's say we did. And in fact, I did have one customer. I'm speaking, of course, as a former systems engineer for next generation firewall company. So I have designed and implemented hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of firewall configurations in my career. That's in the last big thing that I was doing in my career. That was what I was doing. That's my wheelhouse right there. So we could talk for days about firewalls if you'd like to, but we won't, I promise. The way that we commonly will implement these is with that single device. But I did have one customer that put in one manufacturer's firewall on the outside and a different manufacturer's firewall as your inside firewall, which effectively is the design that you described, Dennis. That is exactly the design. They did it because of concerns they had about security of data, specifically PCI. They were concerned about credit card information, which was ironic because this company was not a company. Again, they were doing credit card transactions, but they were primarily focused on a different type of data. So it was odd that they were focusing on credit cards, but who was I to complain? They were buying my firewall. So, okay, I'm fine with that. However you want to design it, rock and roll. That's your party. And so what they do is have traffic come into the first firewall. It evaluates whether information should be allowed or disallowed, primarily from the IPS and antivirus functionality. And then that traffic was forwarded on through the rest of the network if it was allowed. Then it reached the other firewall where it was evaluated again and then allowed into the inside if that's where they were sending that traffic. Dennis's question, though, is, since we have these 2 firewalls and the first one lets traffic in, are we configuring rules in the second firewall that say allow traffic from the first? Well, you aren't. You don't. You're always doing this by IP address on a firewall. Most of the firewalls that you will use, the vast, vast, vast majority of the firewalls that you will use, make their decisions in their firewall rule base at layer 3. They are layer 3 devices. They're at the very minimum is layer 3. In the case of a next generation firewall, obviously you could be making this decision at layer 7. But the minimum layer in most firewalls is the IP address. We don't generally set rules based on a MAC address. And because of that, the IP address that's coming into the first firewall and being allowed through is the same IP address that reaches the second firewall. And if it goes through that firewall, it probably even has the same IP address on the other side. Unless you're doing some type of network address translation, which may be taking place, but let's kind of take that out of the equation right now and just talk about the way that layer 3 is layer 3. From the time that packet leaves the origination until the time that it gets to its destination, it has the same IP addresses all the way through, unless some type of address translation is being done. And because of that, we can make forwarding decisions every stop of the way based on the IP address, because the IP address is never changing. If it changed, it would be going somewhere else. So that's why we can't change the IP address. We need to know where that destination is going. So no, we don't have to create a rule that quote unquote, accepts communication from the first firewall, you simply have a rule that either allows or disallows traffic based on the origination or the destination. You don't have to worry about what's in the middle. Could you imagine doing that if it was traffic that you're sending to, let's say, Google? You ever do a trace route to Google? It's like 13 hops. What if you had to set a firewall rule that allowed traffic from every possible router on the internet? Oof, that would take forever. You'd never be able to do it. It's impractical. And so that's why you don't have to worry about it, because it's all at layer 3. It's all happening at layer 3. So you don't have to worry about any firewall knowing about any other firewall or any router knowing about any other router. They all work autonomously. They're all their own entity, and you don't have to worry about any of those. Let's do another question. Do I have time for another question? I do have time for another question. Let's do another one and step through what other things might be here. We'll scroll down and see what's there. So other things that are there. This is a good one. So we can even do this. I want to step through this because I often talk about it, but I don't talk how it's done. This question from Alex, it says, when can I be sure that I'm ready to take the exam? And this is maybe in my top 5 questions that I get. So I love that this question was asked. So let's step through what that process looks like in my mind. If I was going to do this, what would it look like? And the thing that I think everyone should start with and should end with are the exam objectives. This is a set of the exam objectives. You should download these. This is for your N10-008 Network Plus exam. And this gives you information, all the information you need to know to pass the exam. Everything's in here. This is free. You can get it from my website at professormesser.com/objectives. Gives you a link over to the CompTIA website, or simply go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. First one will take you there. First link available. So it tells you about what the Network Plus is, takes you about how it's accredited, how it's developed, the authorized material use policy, which is also important. And they tell you, and this is where other places on the internet might get you messed up. So let me make sure you're very clear on this. They put at the bottom of the first page this text. And it says, the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists. Other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. Now, if you look at a third-party training provider and you're reading their book or you're looking at their website, you're going through their materials, and they're talking about something that's not in this list, and you bring it up to them, they'll point at that and go, well, they could ask you anything, which is probably the laziest thing that a content provider can do, is to say, oh, it doesn't matter because they could ask you anything. But they don't. Although they put that at the bottom, I think the lawyers put that at the bottom, they don't actually go outside the scope of this document. And that's the important thing to remember, which means that you could say I've marked my document up like crazy with all of these strange colors, but that's normal for me, which means we can use this as a checklist. And if we stick to this list and we go through the entire exam objectives and we can explain every bullet to ourselves or to someone else, you're ready to take the exam. So let's look at the very first section, section 1.1, compare and contrast the Open Systems Interconnection, OSI model, layers and encapsulation concepts. So you have to know the OSI model, layers 1 through 7, physical, data link, network, transport, session, presentation, and application. And of course, you have to know what each one of those layers does in the world of networking. We also have to understand data encapsulation and decapsulation within the OSI model context, specifically where the Ethernet header fits in there. Where does the IP header fit in there? Where does TCP and UDP fit in there? What are TCP flags? What about the payload? What about the MTU, or maximum transmission unit? So can you explain that to yourself? Can you talk about the focus on those topics? What is an Ethernet header? Where do you usually see this being used? What type of device uses an Ethernet header? And where does that Ethernet header fit in the OSI model? Can we answer that or not? If we can't, put a circle around it, because we need to come back to that one and study up a little more. So you do that with every bullet. You try to explain what that bullet is and how it fits into the bigger picture of networking. Once you're done with that section, we go to the next section. Section 1.2, explain the characteristics of network topologies and network types, including mesh, star, hub and spoke, bus, ring, hybrid, network types, peer-to-peer, client-server, LAN, MAN, WAN, WLAN, PAN, CAN, SAN, SD-WAN, MPLS, MGRE. Gets a little crazy there after a while. Start saying those. You have to know what all of those are. You have to be able to explain what they are, how they fit into the big world of networking. Then you can check that one off your list. So just do that with every single bullet in the exam objectives. If you do that, you will know everything you need to know to pass your exam. I say it's that simple. It's not simple at all because there's a ton of information in there. So I think that's a very good example of why working with those tools, understanding that set of objectives is going to be the difference between you passing the exam and you not passing this exam. That's how important it is. So use that as your guideline. Use it as a checklist. And as I said, if you can check off every bullet, or I would say 90% of all of the bullets that are in there, you're ready to take your exam. You will pass this exam if you know that. CompTIA rarely, and I mean rarely, goes outside of the scope of those exam objectives. And in fact, they've said sometimes we do ask questions that are outside the scope, but those are for our testing purposes and we don't grade them. You never really know if that's the case with a particular question you get on the exam, but I would tell you, based on experience that we've had and experience that others have had, that the exam objectives, they stay almost perfectly on a rail with those objectives. So that's how important those objectives are. And it's also how important it is to dismiss anything that's not in the objectives. If you're going to a third-party site and they're asking you questions about topics that aren't in the exam objectives, you are safe to ignore them. They are not going to appear on your exam. I don't know why other content providers don't update their content. I don't know why they ask questions that aren't on the exam objectives. You'll have to ask them. I don't know. I prefer giving you content that is perfectly designed specifically for that version of the exam. There's no reason to go outside the scope of that. Trust me, you will have plenty of time in your career to go outside the scope of the exam. It doesn't have to be now. Let's do another question. Next on our list. So this is sort of a follow-up to that. And I think it's not a bad way to look at this. Jay asks, when studying, should I put heavy emphasis on studying for one full section a week? For example, the entirety of section 1. Well, one of your challenges, of course, is that the exam itself, each section is a different size. It's a different amount of content in each section. So locking yourself down to a particular time frame, probably not the most accurate way to do it. Let's go back to those objectives though. I've got these objectives right here. If we go back to the front of the objectives, you can see that on the exam, section 1 is 24% of the exam, section 2 is 19, section 3 is 16. Then we go back to 19 and then 22. So you can see that you should probably be studying more for section 1 networking fundamentals than you are studying for section 3 network operations, because there's a different emphasis on exam content. Now, in reality, what you'll find is that section 1 is pretty big. It's got all the way up to section 1.8. Section 2 goes to 2.4. And section 3, that's the only thing in section 3, this one page. So you can see the differences between how much content is in each of these domains. It is quite different between those different domains. So I would say locking yourself into a particular 1 week for this section, 1 week for this domain, 1 week for this domain, 1 week for that domain, probably not the best way to study. I think going through and studying bullet by bullet as you go and not limiting yourself to a particular time frame is perhaps more important. In the end, your knowledge of the content is not going to be based on how much time you spend studying. It's going to be based on how long does it take you to check off all of those bullets. And if that takes a week for one domain, great. But if it takes 2 weeks for a single domain, that's fine too. The important part is that you know every single bullet. That's how you should be measuring this. Putting an arbitrary date into studying is not generally the best way to go about doing this. So hopefully that's something that can give you a perspective of how studying for this exam has variability. You need to make sure that you spend the right amount of time on these topics. Some topics you may find harder than others. You're going to need to spend a little more time studying those particular topics. So very important. Other ideas, other things that we have in here. I think here's a pretty good one. We kind of talked about entry level earlier when I mentioned, well, A+ is entry level, Network Plus is entry level, Security Plus is entry level. And so Anonymous asks, well, what's considered entry level when it comes to certifications and where you are in your IT career? Well, obviously entry level means that you're early on in your IT career. And knowing what's entry level, we sort of have an understanding on our side that A+ and Network Plus and Security Plus and perhaps some others in the industry are entry level certs. But I think the best person to tell you what's entry level is the hiring manager who put out the job posting for the entry level position. So if this is a job for entry level help desk 1, we tend to put these in different categories. Help desk 1, help desk 2, help desk 3. And this might be levels of help desk. You're the first tier, you're who gets called first. There might be a second tier of help desk that when the first tier can't figure it out, they go to tier 2. And when tier 2 has a particularly challenging problem, they might go to tier 3. This is a very common thing we see in networking, for example. Maybe not always in sort of corporate help desk, but sometimes you will see different levels, different tiers in the help desk. So anybody who's looking for help desk tier 1, what's on that job posting is entry-level information, according to that manufacturer, according to that hiring manager, according to that company that is hiring for this. So they determine what is entry-level. And then most of us understand that's A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, maybe the entry-level Amazon, maybe some entry-level Microsoft, those types of things. And if you're looking at a position that is a network administrator 1, well, that position is one where you're well above entry level at that point. You're into the networking field. You're into network administration, server administration. You're doing cloud administration. You're up at those higher levels. Well, that's not entry level anymore. We know that's not the entry. You don't usually start in those jobs. The jobs you're starting on, that's an entry level position. So you can look at the job postings to see what do they really mean when they say entry level. Well, what do they say? What do they think entry level is? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter what I think it is. Doesn't matter what you think it is. It really matters what the hiring manager thinks it is. And you have to build all of your strategies for getting that job around what they think. It's an odd place you have to put yourself in. You work so hard to create these credentials, to earn these certifications, and then you sort of have to work somebody else's perspective of what those certifications mean. And that's sort of the way this industry works in general. Any industry really works that way in general, unless you are required to get a particular qualification. For example, if you are, if you're working on being a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. A bar exam, you must pass the bar exam or you can't be a lawyer. If you want to be a nurse, you have to pass your nursing board exam or you can't be a nurse. That is a wall. That is one where you are not just gatekeeping, that is wall keeping. Like you can't come in unless you pass this exam. IT is not like that. IT is one where you are accumulating these certs so that you can show other people that you have spent time and an effort understanding these technologies, understanding these very difficult topics so that you can apply those towards whatever job you may find. Very different in perspective. A lot of people will say, hey, I have my A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. What job am I now guaranteed to get? None. You're guaranteed to get no jobs. You have to go get the job. Just simply earning a certification doesn't somehow open the door and let you walk in. You still have to do the hard work. But you want to be better qualified than everybody else for that particular position. And that involves your formal education. It involves your industry certifications. It involves maybe some experiences that you've had using these technologies. And it might even involve you knowing someone who already works there. So sometimes these qualifications have nothing to do with your technical knowledge and have everything to do with how well they trust you as a person, which is a valuable thing for a company. So make sure you're familiar with those too. Let's do another question. are we on time? We're running short, so we'll do another bit of question. This is a pretty good one. You can apply this to almost anything in Network Plus. Is there an easy way to memorize all of those crazy standards? And we can apply this to your Ethernet standards, your wireless standards, your cabling standards, your IEEE standards. All of those are in here. Juan specifically says 802.3 and 802.11. And you're right. The 802.3 standards, we saw just a few of those today with the 10G base T, 10G base FX, 10G base SX. You've got tons of standards to walk through there. You've also got all these 802.11 wireless standards, A, B, G, N, keep going to AC, AX, and then what's next? Are we going to keep having to add on to these? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. What about all the other things we have to know? What about all the cabling standards? What about color standards? What about so there's a lot of rote memorization, as it turns out, on this exam, on the Network Plus exam. The thing is that a lot of times you take exams like this and you memorize it, and as soon as the exam is over, you never use that information again. You go to a history class, you spend all this time memorizing those dates and places, and then when you're done with the exam, if you're not doing something with the history, you tend to forget it almost immediately. Well, it's not that way with networking. You don't somehow never run into 802.11 in your career. You always are going to run into 802.11. You will always be using 802.3. You will always be needing to know what the coloring scheme is on these wires because you use them every day. They are surrounding you right now. All of these standards, they're constantly used. So this is one where maybe you haven't gotten down into this level yet in your career. Maybe you're just starting out and you haven't got into the world of memorizing port numbers because you're thinking, why am I memorizing these port numbers? Guess what? You're going to use them constantly when you're configuring a firewall, when you're looking at a packet trace, when you're trying to define a service on a server. You're going to run into these port numbers constantly. And after a while, you just start memorizing them. You just start knowing them. Take, for example, for those of you that drive a car, do you even think about how you drive a car anymore? But remember when you were first starting out, you sit in the car. What do you do first? Push the brake. Oh, okay, push the brake. All right, I'm pushing the brake. Now what? All right, now you turn the key. I'm assuming we're driving an automatic. You turn the key. Okay, and then you just hold it? Do you let it go? Wait for it to start, and then you let the key go. These days it's much easier. Push the button, and the car starts. Okay, now, how do we get it to go? We have to put it into drive. Okay, how do you do that? Is there a drive button? No, there's a bar right here. You did drive. I forgot the seatbelt. There, chat room's telling me I'm already illegal. Well, I forgot the seatbelt. Okay, I put the seatbelt. You don't even think about it anymore. So this is what happens with networking too. Although it seems like right now we're fighting to figure out where the brake is and remembering to put the seatbelt on and how do you put it into drive. But now when you hop in the car, you don't even think about it. You're having a different conversation. So where do you want to go for lunch? We'll just get this done. Sounds like a good idea. The salad would be nice. Maybe a sandwich. We'll go get some soup. Let's go. You're already driving down the road. You don't even think about it. So trust me, the same thing is going to happen for you with networking. You will get to a point where port numbers are just second nature. Understanding the color scheme, you might have to think about it a little bit, but you're looking at the cable going, wait a second, that's not the same scheme on both sides. No wonder we're getting 100 megabit speeds and not gigabit. We can tear up a network pretty quick by using the wrong standards. Or you're trying to spec in a wireless network and they're saying, we got wireless AC here, we got wireless AX here. What do we do? What frequencies do we use? How do we set this up? So you just start doing it when you start working through the details of it. It just becomes so second nature. So although we spend a lot of time memorizing and it seems very rote and you're wondering, is there a reason for all of this or is this just busy work? None of this is busy work. You will use these technologies and the information that you memorize throughout your career, whether you work specifically in a networking role or not. Networking touches everything. Touches the servers, it touches the workstations, it touches your applications, the databases, the cloud. You use it in everything. And so knowing this technology is the foundation you use to build on for whatever else you do in this career. we often don't speak in such terms about the Network Plus, but that's really what we're doing here, is creating a very solid foundation that we can now build on. And for better or worse, going through the process of, at least at the beginning, using this as a rote memorization is going to be very important for you as you continue to grow in this career. Well, as many of you know, this is the week where in the United States we have Thanksgiving. And this is a great time of year. Usually it's where we get a bunch of family around. Hey, whether we like them or not, they're going to come over. So the family's here. I like my family, so it's a good thing. They get to come over, get to see the nieces and nephews, the brothers and the sisters that we haven't seen for a long time. We get to call the folks that we're not able to visit and just say hello and how much we appreciate them. And I wanted to say the same to you. Thanksgiving is a time where we can finally take a few extra days and thank you for the things that have happened this year. And it has been an amazing year. It has been a remarkable year. As you know, a lot of this is behind the scenes. It is us trying to get the content out. It's us trying to get our networks working properly. It's us getting the content you need into your hands. And we work very hard to make sure that we provide you with the best and most accurate training materials possible. And we do that, and we are so passionate about it because you are the ones that give us the feedback in return. We get to see the people that are earning their certs. We hear the stories of the things that you're learning. We step through the process with you. When things don't go right, we help you get back on track. Well, when things do go right, we get to hear the success stories, and we are so thankful just to be part of that process. We love what we do here, but obviously we couldn't do it without you. And so I wanted to thank you on this week of Thanksgiving here in the United States for what you do for us. So thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, and what we do, from myself, from Lori, and for anyone else who does the crazy stuff that we do here behind the scenes. Thank you so much for everything you've done throughout the year. Thanks for joining us on the study group. We hope to see you for many, many more in the future. Come on back in December. We finish up the year with our Network Plus study group. Make sure you put that on your schedule. It's also on our calendar and in our event calendar on the Discord. If you're not on the Discord, go to professormesser.com/Discord. That's where I'm going after this. Thanks for being here in our study group. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.